All right. I think I think the thing that always throws me off with teaching myself some new skill is how far down the rabbit hole you have to go. If you want to learn how to write an app, it's like, should I learn JavaScript? And then you read online, oh, you actually need to get closer to the metal, and you need to learn C. And then you need to, it's not C, you need to learn assembly code or something like that. And I feel like that always throws me off because beneath that, then you're learning physics and things like that. So Madison, I know you've been learning in public quite a bit. I saw that you were recently picking up assembly, and I'm curious where you fall on that spectrum of how deep do you have to go? How do you follow your curiosity with your learning journey as you've been getting better and better at coding?
Yeah, I think I'm still trying to figure that out. But I know originally, maybe 5 years ago, I started learning a little computer science. And I think at the time, I mostly thought, okay, I want to be a well-rounded programmer. This is what I'm supposed to know. So I was coming at it not from a place of curiosity, more of, okay, I should know this stuff for things like salary increase. And I think I fell off really quickly because my motivation was not quite for the right reasons, maybe. But recently, especially in the last 6 months, yeah, I joined CS Primer again, and I've kind of I looked at the curriculum and I just looked at things as what is the most exciting thing to me? Like, what would I like to learn about on a Friday night instead of Netflix, which is very enticing. And that has actually really helped me. And I think that's what I've been trying to focus on is just learning about things that I'm really genuinely excited about. And I know Oz has talked about this a little. You guys have talked a little bit about you find something and you just start pulling at the thread.
Well, I'm curious what motivated you to have that kind of mental shift, or like what caused that shift in your mindset towards learning? Because that like FOMO or the like anxiety driven I should be learning X or Y thing is very, very common.
Mm.
It's like you bring up Hacker News and people know all these things you haven't even heard of, and you're like, this is obviously something that I should open up 100 tabs around and neglect. It's like, how do you move from the anxiety-driven mindset to the like joy-driven mindset?
That's a good question. Well, I think I got really burnt out, first of all, in the last few years, which I would not recommend. But you're right, you see so much on Hacker News, and you see, especially with AI, there's so much AI fear now. And like, I need to learn the new AI tool, I need to learn
Mm.
this. So I think I was trying to keep up with everything, and I'm very online. And I eventually got very burnt out and just didn't feel any joy in it at all. And I kind of just let that be okay. I kind of just told myself, I'm not going to be able to keep up with everything and finally accepting that. So all of the anxiety, piling up and just saying, okay, I can't keep up with it all. And then I kind of just tried to start from scratch again
Mm.
and just let it be okay. Like maybe I'm not going to be the passionate programmer who's learning every weekend. Maybe I'm a little burnt out right now and like just let that be okay. And then from there, I just had a couple of things happen. Like the Primogen, he talked about C a little. I literally reread Oz's article called The Cost of Forsaking C. And I was like, huh, C. And everyone's like, oh, C sucks. Don't learn C. But then I was looking at it and I thought memory was so fascinating because I really had only come from a JavaScript background and like, wow, allocating memory manually. And I got really, like, I just got really excited again. Like, I felt like I found something and got really excited. I felt like I got that spark back. And so I don't know, I guess letting all the anxiety just fade away and accepting it and then just trying to find something for fun really worked well for me recently.
How
I,
does the workplace to factor into the decision making around what you're going to be picking up? Right, because you're working as a web developer right now. Is there some portion of your allocation of time where it's like I need to pick up these skills for work, or there's some interesting project that opens up a new opportunity? Are you segmenting that from time that you might dive into C? Because I can't imagine you're using C right now in a web. I know I'm not. Um, So do you divide your time between that, or is it just more informal?
It's much more informal. Yeah, I've been working as a developer for like 6 or 7 years now. And a lot of the development stuff, I think I'm starting to see some crossovers, but I
Mm.
think a lot of stuff like working with frameworks and stuff, it's good. I'm interested in it, but I'm just a lot more interested in going low level right now. So they don't feel entirely connected right at the moment, but I'm kind of letting that be okay. Like I really want to, I have my weekend time. I have a lot of time in my life right now, not a mom, things like that. So it's like I can dive more into this stuff right now. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
I was gonna say, Oz, I feel very similar to Madison, and I think the thing that always has inspired my curiosity-driven learning is I've been a fan of history. So anytime I can sort of see and imagine myself being part of, we love Bell Labs, we talk about it all the time, but folks like working with real machines where you're like have to go into the warehouse and you have to do the punch card style thing. It was this, for me, it's like a nostalgia-driven curiosity with this stuff. And it's interesting that that nostalgia driven approach can still have ramifications on why things aren't working in my day-to-day job. It's really cool to see that the history is carried forward in that way. And that's often fueled the books that I'll pick up. Like I think Oz had recommended some Unix history by, I think, Kernighan a couple of years ago, and it was just, I devoured that, and that's personally something that I've been really inspired by.
I was really inspired by the old Bradfield campus actually, because I had took a class there forever ago and just going in and picking up like books off the shelf you guys had and structure and interpretation of computer programs and everyone there was so incredibly smart. It just felt like, yeah, it was such a cool place.
rest in
Oz,
peace.
yeah, yeah, it is no more. Okay. Oz, in your journey, like I feel like you've touched every language. You approach programming in a way I can truly never understand, and I try to as best I can. But how do you figure out what you want to pick up and learn next?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I've been through this part of the journey as well because I was self-taught as well.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of us self-taught engineers, we're just like more prone to that feeling of what did I miss out on? What do other people know that I don't? And like, shouldn't I be feeling that? Aren't I an inferior person or developer or something? If I don't like fill this gap?
Yeah.
And I think the biggest step change for me was seeking out things that were very different to what I knew already, as opposed to things that were more proximate to what I knew, but that other people were into. So, like, I did some work. I did a lot of work in Python early in my career. I also did a little bit in Ruby, but I was never really into Ruby. And a bunch of other people were. Like, for whatever reason, Ruby on Rails was this big trendy thing for a while. And I kind of pushed myself to learn it and didn't get very far, not because it was challenging, but maybe because it wasn't. Like I just started realizing that it was more or less a translation of what I already knew,
Mm.
with different parameters. And I was like, hey, why am I spending my time on this thing? And yeah, it must have been around that time some friends were really getting into closure, which is not practical. It's not you. There isn't a market demand for closure. Like it was my friends and like 10 other people who were into closure. But I played around with it. And that was just way more fun because it was different. It was
Yeah.
challenging. It was like a different way of thinking about things. And that shift from like, is it something that's kind of straightforward and easy to is it something that's actually challenging, irrespective of whether there's immediate market value in it? That I think allowed me to get a bit more energized. So now it's an extension of that as well, to the point where it's like a new programming language isn't going to do it for me. I feel like because I mean, modesty aside, it's just like I've dabbled in enough
Yeah.
different general purpose programming languages that a new general purpose programming language, like I can't get excited about Rust. I just can't. To me, it's like I can see why you're excited about Rust. It's like close enough to all of the other languages that I know that I can triangulate and I know what the experience is. And I've written a little bit, but like I know what the experience would be to write this all day long, and I'm not excited about learning the ins and outs of this thing. It's just like it's familiar. But a new domain is interesting. So it's
Mhm.
like if I have a new challenge, um, and it's like I need to understand an aspect of how this work is done, how to like use technology to solve this problem. That's more interesting. So, at the moment as a kind of hobby project, I'm trying to get ready for a Kaggle competition that'll be next year. That's
Mm,
effectively a computer vision problem. I haven't seriously worked in computer vision.
cool.
Um, I don't need to learn any new programming, but I do need to learn the domain. So that makes it a bit more interesting. But yeah, it's like a kind of reflective, like what is actually going to sustain my interest for long enough for me to learn this, and it's just very different to um, other people's ways of sustaining interest, I think, because I don't feel the FOMO anymore. I don't like something that seems novel to other people doesn't necessarily seem novel to me. So I just need to think for myself a little bit about that.
Oh, well, I feel like you've passed through the threshold of being able to recognize a domain you don't understand and say, there is a thing, other people know it, and I can know it too with deliberate practice. And I feel as if you have confidently tackled that and have that degree of self-confidence in your learning capabilities right now
At least on the software side.
on the software.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I feel excited to take on things that are outside of
Well, you're
software.
you're making your own
Like,
potash out of like burnt embers of wood, aren't you?
yeah, well, yeah, there's that side of things as well, where
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, chemistry, biology, like these are
Yeah.
things that I can't just like easily triangulate my existing knowledge to. But I think the meta thing, and this like maybe comes back to the homeschooling conversation as well, is like being able to think about for yourself what is interesting to you and what is going to be a good feedback loop for you and what is going to sustain like your interest in a topic,
Mm.
as opposed to just pattern matching to other people's, like getting someone else's curriculum or getting, seeing someone else's journey and emulating that. It's like people's circumstances are pretty different.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, especially when you're homeschooled versus not. I think now when I'm babysitting things, I think I see people, you go to a school and then your entire school experience, you're trying to get into a certain college. And I think there's some mimetic desire at play, like you want to get into the good college or the same college as some of your friends. And then you're in college and you're trying to get a certain job. And I personally do think that a benefit of homeschooling is just you're a little bit more like outside of that system. And I feel like at least I thought a little bit more about, yeah, what is right for me, versus what other people are doing so much because you're maybe not quite in the system as much around everyone else. Yeah.
Did you have like a structured homeschooling experience? Was it unschooled? Like, was it like school at home? What was your homeschool experience like?
It was very structured at times, and then other years it was unschooling completely. So I would say we were kind of an experiment for my parents. My dad is also a teacher. He just retired, but he was a teacher for 30 years at the local high school. And so yeah, it was mixed. There was sometimes like there was many years I had a math tutor. He was a state credentialed tutor. There was many years I had an English tutor, and she actually taught at Stanford, but she would also teach me once a week, just, out somewhere. We go to a coffee shop and we'd have a curriculum. And so, but then there was also other years where, like at certain times I was very young, and if I wanted to spend 6 months just on like Jane Austen, I was obsessed with Jane Austen, and I did nothing else but that for 6 months. And I know that for some people that'd be very scary because there's like this, you must learn these certain things in school at a certain time. Like maybe I was behind on my math or science, but I do think that gave me an ability to like really go deep on my interests now if I want to and kind of cast away other things. And I do really appreciate that. I appreciate that about my childhood, just being able to get interested in something and follow that passion. I feel, looking back, I don't feel like I'm somehow behind others because I was unschooled in any way. Yeah.
Okay, I just thought of this hypothetical. Maybe it's too crazy, but imagine, Madison, you had an employer who said to you, you can do whatever you want for 6 months as an employee. Right, because it's like during the unschool experience, you got to do that because like you had your entire day as well to do that. Whereas now we're saying, well, you've got to balance a day job where you're doing web development against like what you're interested to do on Fridays or whatever, because you've still got enough spare time left over. But it's like, what if you could do that at work? And maybe they had some terms for it, like you need to continue on at the company for another 2 years or something. What would you be doing with that 6 months of freedom, that paid 6 month learning experience?
I mean, that sounds so fun. Honestly, I think about this sometimes in the real world. Like recently, I'm like, should I just quit like I have savings, should I just quit my job? What I really want to do is more of CS primer. And like truly, I want to learn more deeper computer science. I feel like I'm a CS primer ad now, but that is truly like such a big interest for me. I have to be a little careful though, because I also do some math academy sometimes, and I'm just think math is so fun. So I have to be careful because I have to be good about, not going too many different subjects. There's so many fascinating things to learn. But that is really what I would probably spend time at, just, trying to crack more of those problems and exploring that. And just doing stuff around that, creating book clubs around it. That's probably what I would spend 6 months on. It just sounds really fun.
As I was assuming you were going to say that whatever you do over 6 months has to be of value to the company in some way, and
Oh,
not that learning CS would not be valuable. Obviously, being a better engineer is important, but I thought you were saying like go brainstorm something and bring back some idea to
oh, maybe I
yeah.
misinterpreted it. It's just
No, I
all
don't
about.
know. That's what I was thinking.
No, I was just
Yeah.
curious, like what you would spend the time on. But the interesting thing for me is that I think there are companies out there who'd be like, Madison, we'll do this. You can spend six months, gradually transitioning from like web development for the company to, uh, something that's more like infrastructure work or performance engineering or something that's going to be like a little bit more, CS, utilizing CS heavy. Um, there are going to be companies out there, but they're obviously not advertising for that, I guess, because there's a selection problem. But yeah, I mean,
Is
maybe
that unschooling? You all both were using that term, and I've seen it, but I'm not familiar with it. Is it just that there is no curriculum? Is that what that means?
it's a pretty broad term. There are some people who are like now may go by radical unschooler,
Uh,
where they're like, well, you shouldn't try to have any influence over your kids. And I saw a Reddit thread recently where people were talking about the idea of strewing, which is like you shouldn't tell your kid to read a book, but is it ethically okay to leave the book on the coffee table, like in front of them for them to accidentally discover? Like, as
uh,
unschoolers, are we okay with that kind
oh
of
boy.
level of influence? So, like overall, I think it's the attitude that you shouldn't try and recreate the structure of school at home, and you should have more flexibility and so on. And this is like the moderate view of it, and the extreme view of it is that you know anything that is influenced by the parents could be coercive and damaging and so on.
Hmm.
So you have unschoolers where the kids just play computer games all day, and you have unschoolers where the kids like work on really cool projects, and are like nudged or maybe even find their parents inspiring in some way and see their work as like well, their own projects and interests as something that drives them. So
Yeah.
there's a full spectrum, but basically it's like not school at home.
Yeah.
Can we hear where you are on the spectrum, Oz?
I'm in the like the strewing. I mean, my kids are young, so like I feel like anything that there is like a huge cost to pushing anything on them. And so it just seems like pragmatically like you shouldn't push anything uh for a young kid. But uh I do try and nudge them in the direction of things that would be interesting. I do leave books out for them to discover. Or like I'll be on my laptop doing something fun and they'll come around and be like, "Oh, what are you doing? Oh, you're doing some Python programming? Can I do some Python programming?" So that's where I am on the spectrum.
My daughter's obsessed with kidpix.app or .net or something, which is this recreation of this like Microsoft Paint style thing, and it
Okay.
makes sounds as you do the stamps. And she like, I'm pretty sure she thinks this is what my job is. Like when I'm like, oh, I have to go to work. She's like, I want to do your work, and then she like instantly pulls up KidPix, and it would be awesome if that was my job, and I love that point of view. Yeah, I'm trying to strew as well I have a 3-year-old daughter, Madison, and I think the thing that Oz enlightened me to about homeschooling, and maybe you both already understood this, was that you can learn things way earlier than the schools will teach them to you. And it seems straightforward, but like learning to read could happen much earlier. And that's kind of, it's just blowing my mind because I loved school. And I know a lot of people don't, didn't have a great experience, et cetera. I loved being told, do this and you get a cookie, and then getting that cookie. I always loved that. And I always did really well at that. And it's been interesting, to think about with my own kids, like, I don't want to put them in those shackles. Like if they can get the cookie way earlier and they can choose a different cookie. And I think that's been really cool to see.
I love that.
Do
Yeah.
you still work that way though, Charlie? Like,
Oh
are
yeah,
you,
I
is there
am,
like an end of year bonus cookie that you're working
oh my
towards?
God, I am just a words of affirmation hound. So I can't help it. It is in my nature. There's a book that tells me it's okay to be that way. But yeah, I think
Wait, what's the book?
well, I'm thinking isn't it the 5 love languages? And I think my love language is words of affirmation. That's true, right? And I think there's another one that the 5 are. Have you heard of this, Oz?
I've heard of the concept,
Okay.
but no, I want to know the 5. What are the 5?
Words of affirmation, touch, gifts, which no one will admit is their favorite, but it's everyone's favorite.
No one wants to admit that one. You just
No one wants exactly. Uh,
quality
quality time and acts of service. And the idea is if you and your partner, like you may want to receive things in a certain way and give them in another, but that might not be matching up with your partner, and that can cause some issues. And I think in practice, it's been a useful framework for understanding things. So yeah, it's I don't know. Does that resonate at all, Oz?
So wait, the cookie is a word of affirmation. It's not a
For me,
gift.
it's a word of affirmation. I want to be told,
Because it's like the teacher likes you.
good boy, do this report. I was like, okay, I'll do this book report on the Titanic. You got it.
It's good that you know that about yourself.
Yeah. I just don't know if anyone's saying it recently is the problem.
start emailing you just really positive things every day.
Oh my God, that'd be so nice, Madison.
I think that might be mine. I think all 5 are mine, but I think words of affirmation as well, for sure. And it's interesting you guys were talking about the nudges. I think my parents growing up were big readers, and they definitely had some just reading nudges, or they'd be like, every Friday we go to the library, but they wouldn't force us to go to the library, but then we would go. And then if you see your parents being really excited about something, then you get really excited too. So we became just, huge readers. But it's funny because some of the things they tried backfired as well. For example, since we were homeschooled and we were at home, my parents didn't have a TV in the house for years, no television allowed, because they were worried that we watched TV all day. And then I remember, though, we had no TV for a long time. And then I was 8 or 9 and we went to Disneyland for the first time. And my parents could not get us to leave the hotel room because there was a TV on that had like Disney Channel. We're like, oh my God, TV, we're so excited. And like, Disneyland is outside. And we're like, heck no. And like, we went to Hawaii and we'd be like, my dad's like, we got to go snorkeling. There's this beautiful beach. And we're like, no, all we want to do is watch TV all day. Like we wanted to do that. He had to force us to go out in Hawaii. And now it's just like such a hilarious, like backfiring experiment, I guess.
Yeah, the question is like, what's the minimal amount of TV that you can inject into the situation early that they're not that into it.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I didn't have any required reading, and I do feel like because no one forced me to read, I do like my sisters and I are all just really big readers, and I do feel like because it wasn't forced upon me and book reports and things, I felt like that helped me to fall more in love with it, just enjoying reading. I don't know.
Forced
Like I
reading seems
did it.
crazy. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, for anyone who
Sorry, I
doesn't,
liked it. I liked
you
knowing
liked forced
like
reading because you got a
so
cookie at the end.
well, so I would see the older kids and I loved reading as an early age, but I'd see in fourth grade you got to read, I don't know, maybe Lord of the Flies. That's not in fourth grade, but I'd see that upperclassmen would get to read that, and I would sort of be like, I can't wait till I can do it. And then subversively, maybe I'd read it the year before. And it felt good to me. I liked the idea that there was this like hidden knowledge or books that I got to read. So it's less about what they made me read in that time, but I liked knowing that there was this like special track, and I was inching ever closer.
Yeah.
But you didn't ever have a situation where you read the first chapter or two and you're like, I'm not into this book right now, maybe later. But the teacher's like, no, you need to finish and write an essay about that. You didn't have that
I
experience?
just always liked my other fatal flaw is the last thing I read, I think is like the best thing I've ever read in my life. I think I walk out of a movie, I'm like, that was the best movie ever. Last sandwich I had was the best one I ever had, and I mean it. So it's never really been a problem for me.
You just really are a good boy, Charlie. You just
Thank
you
you.
love everything. Sandwich life is great.
You should look at my Goodreads reviews. I don't think I've ever left anything lower than 5 stars. Even if I didn't like it, I still,
Book recommendations.
yeah, don't
I
come to
mean,
me for
I can be
recommendations.
like that too about a book or a new, health hack, or you read something and I'm like, this week, this is life-changing. And my family's like, you said that last week. Like it's hard to be as excited about this new thing every single week, but
yeah, sorry guys, but I'm recalibrating all the book recommendations you've given me.
Yeah, yeah,
just
you should. You should.
lower your expectations on us.
So this is a common theme of this podcast. Know thyself, and use that in the context of your learning as well. This is actually a revelation for me, Charlie, that you like cookies.
Mm,
By the way, you're doing a great job with this podcast.
thank you. Thank you.
You've invited just fantastic guests. You are asked
Yeah,
great questions.
thanks. Thanks.
Bring a real can-do
I've always
attitude.
appreciated your sincerity in all things us. So thank you.
Um,
I was gonna
but
say
yeah,
you've done
sorry,
a
go
great
ahead.
job on the podcast, but I don't want to sound insincere. Sorry, go ahead, Oz. I was about to say I believe
I
that's true.
really am sincere. But I was gonna say, so any other revelations about yourself, like understanding yourself and using that, to pick better jobs or pick better learning styles or attitudes? What's like a change that you've made to your approach for both of you?
Mm. Madison, what do you think?
Um, I think one thing that jumps out at me is, Oz, you were saying earlier, people join CS Primer or they really start learning anything and then we think this is really hard, this is really challenging, right? Where do I even begin? Things like that. I think that one change that I made was just focusing much more on things like deliberate practice and things like that. And then I think when you move to those learning strategies, you feel much less dumb. Like you realize you can learn a lot more, but only if you remove all those distractions and all of those things. And so this might be not so much about me, but a universal thing. But like starting CS Primer, it can seem like, wow, this stuff is really challenging. But I think if you go about it in certain ways, right? Like deliberate practice, all these different things. Like, are you someone who checks your phone every 20 minutes? You're going to struggle with anything. Like, you got to make these changes, right? And so it's interesting to see people thinking like I'm stupid or I'm not good enough to learn this, or self-taught developers, because it's just like changing the environment can help quite a lot, I think.
Yeah, that all resonates with me too. The thing that I would add to that is just if I look at my career, even things that were setbacks that caused uncomfortable change, and I felt like I've continually felt like betting on myself to learn something new and pick up some new discipline and get closer and closer to what I would deem to be creativity or creative work. I started out my career in finance, then I went into like business development and sales, and then it was to engineering. And every time I was sort of inching my way closer to, I think, a more direct career that was related to learning and ongoing learning. Now that I've kind of settled in that, I feel like I've come to a place where there's I'm stable insofar as that I found a domain that I really enjoy, and I think I can continue to learn for the rest of my career. But it's also it's not static. So my takeaway is my learning is just keep betting on yourself. If something bad happens, that's okay. Bad things always happen. Like that job didn't work out, you didn't get that job interview. These things, you're going to find your way as long as you keep betting on yourself. That's been really if I sort of have that looking back, that's my takeaway. And sorry if I'm distracted. I actually need to run to call my doc real quick, but you guys continue.
Go for it.
Okay, fair back.
With the doc.
He's like, I haven't had enough caffeine today. What's going on? Um, yeah, for me, it's something that I was reflecting on recently because it solved a problem for both myself and for one of my kids, is that harder is easier sometimes. It's like um sometimes when I don't want to do something, or um or my kid's not into something, the default thinking is like, oh, we don't want to do this. I don't want to do this because it feels hard or it feels like a barrier to overcome. Um, and the default is to like try and remove the barrier, make it easier or something, but actually making it harder, making it more challenging, at least for me personally, and at least one of my kids. I don't think the other one, but my older daughter, making it more challenging is often the answer. Where it's like before it just didn't seem interesting as a problem. And that's why it seemed tiresome. But like any attempt to make it even easier, like outsource it or something, like I'll have some task. Charlie, I was saying that one of the major revelations for me that I have to keep reminding myself is like sometimes when I think that something is hard to do, it would actually be better if it were harder.
Mm.
Where like I don't want to do something, I'm just experiencing some resistance to something, like clearing out my inbox or whatever. And any attempt that I make to make it easier actually makes it worse.
Oh,
And if I
that's
just
so
say
true. That's
like
so true.
if I find a way to make it more challenging, then I actually get interested enough in it that I'll engage with it and do it.
I need that for my inbox, man. It's just, I know every time I do one of those things, it's like, this took 0.8 seconds. Why did it take me 3 months to do this? So
Yeah,
what is the
the inbox
solution for
thing is a
email?
weird thing because it's hard to like repurpose a chore as like something that's interesting.
Yeah.
Um, but even then, it's you could find a way to be like, well, how do I respond to this email where, well, actually, here's a good example. I get a bunch of emails all the time from people who more or less are asking the same thing. Like, can I get a further discount because I'm a student or this is the situation in the country I'm in or whatever. And it feels like a little bit of a chore to reply. And I could make it easier by, I don't know, um, setting up some kind of automation or a template or something. Or I could make it harder for myself, I guess, by really addressing like what is the core of the concern. Why are people like uh why does this generate so many emails? And could I do some engineering maybe to like change the prices
Remove
or
the
to issue
contact,
people
remove contact Oz email link from
remove the content? I mean, yeah, that's like I'm saying emails are a hard one to make hard. Other tasks, particularly like programming tasks, are easier to make harder, I think. Where you say, okay, a analogous example in the context of programming. We've got a bunch of bugs in the in GitHub that are like in GitHub issues that are like little bugs. And I just cannot bring myself to grind through all these things and figure out why it was that this discrepancy occurred and fix this and move on to the next one. We've got like 20 of them. But to make it harder would be to say, okay, we are a bug-free organization. We
Mm.
this is going to be a bug-free code base. I'm not going to fix these bugs. I am going to fix our engineering standards or re-engineer a portion of the code base or see like what it is that is causing this in the first place and unequivocally fix it, right? Fix it where I'm confident that none of this category of bugs is going to occur again on my watch. That is harder, right? But to me, that's easier because now I actually have some motivation to do this thing. Whereas if I'm like grinding through all the small bugs, but I know more small bugs are going to show up because it's the kind of code base that's hard to not keep generating those small bugs, that to me feels tiresome. So harder is easier.
The I'm curious about accountability buddy as a mechanism. And Madison, your thought on that? Or like, I know a lot of people like, I want to complete this MOOC, this online course, and I'm gonna if I don't do it, I have to donate $200 to some charity, or I'm gonna meet with a buddy. And I know you do a lot of online learning, and I think, yeah, if you're not going to do it, you're not going to do it if you're not into it. But maybe these mechanisms work for some people. Or does that play into how you're thinking about building up online reading clubs? Is it a means for getting these things done? How do you view that?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, Oz, I really want to try that now. I was thinking, gosh, what if I pick up a Jira ticket at work tomorrow and think like, it's just a bug that I'm not that excited to do. I was like, maybe make it harder. I don't know. I'll have to report back on trying that because I haven't thought about that before, but I could see that as a great way to add more motivation. But in terms of accountability, yeah, I remember basically the reason why I created like my Twitter account, for example, was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I wanted to learn more things, but I felt like it would be great to have a group of people who, peers and things like that. And so a lot of the time when I start hosting a book club about for example the coding books I've done over the years, it's kind of my way of saying I'm holding myself accountable because I said like every Sunday at 2 p.m. I will be there on Zoom having read the chapter. And so it kind of is a way of giving myself motivation to actually finish it. The tricky part is for a lot of other people who aren't actually the host, it doesn't work for them. So it works for the host often, but if you're just someone willy-nilly, you didn't pay anything, free community, it might not work well for you, but it's worked well for me for finishing a lot of books. Or I had a leak code practice period where I said, I will be there. And then Sunday, you're like, well, I gotta go to this thing. I told these people I would. The shame of bailing out is just too much. So yeah, I think it's worked well at times as a mechanism for, getting things done.
It seems like it'd work for you, Charlie, because then you're going to get affirmation from everyone else in the room.
Yeah, I know. But now I have the thing I've been increasingly self-conscious about that I think we talked about in the last episode is that maybe all my online learning is just solidly in this edutainment camp. Where am I just like, am I picking up these coding books because they're like the equivalent of reading the next sci-fi book in my mind? And I just, if I'm hard on myself, which I often am, is that I'm not doing enough deliberate practice. God, I don't know how to find time in the day to do it for one thing. But that's an area where I'm like, if I'm like, Charlie, you're not doing a good job. I'm not giving myself a cookie about deliberate practice. I don't deserve a cookie.
I mean, edutainment can be all right as well.
Oh,
Like
wow.
I mean, you have my permission. Good boy.
Thank you.
The maybe it's a replacement for non-educational entertainment. That's great. That's very
Yeah,
healthy.
yeah, that's true.
And really it's like a matter of working back from your goals, right? It's
Yeah.
like if you really have the goal of, getting a dramatically different kind of job or working towards a different kind of lifestyle or whatever, and a step towards that is a skill, and you're not acquiring the skill yet, and you need to do practice towards it, then sure, that's one thing. But if it's, if it's not really working towards your goals, why not?
Yeah. Well, I like Madison, what you said, where you are actively viewing some of these learning goals as alternatives to watching Netflix and making like consciously making that choice. And I think I've been so drained lately. It's like I'm consciously choosing to watch Love is Blind, and I'm very happy about it. It's a show, Oz. I won't even begin to tell you what this is about.
As a TV show.
Yeah,
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 you always need to clarify. Is it a TV show? Is it a film? Like, what is it?
yeah, yeah,
I love that
Talkie
Oz
movie?
doesn't know about this. This is just like, not that it's bad to know about it, but she
yeah.
clearly.
Well, I
What is
brought
it?
up Star Wars, and I was like, didn't know who Boba Fett was or something like that, which I thought was also equally concerning.
It is interesting.
Sometimes I just check the Wikipedia synopsis of these things
Yeah.
and it just kills me.
It's interesting though, because we were talking earlier about curiosity and being excited to learn things, but then when you're actually sitting down to a hard, challenging problem, it doesn't feel so great sometimes, right? Like Friday night, oh, deliberate practice can feel really hard. It can feel like, I'm sitting there and I feel like I'm ripping my hair out. So I guess it's an interesting like dichotomy between you're excited about something, but there will be times when you feel like you're learning something new and your brain hurts a little bit. And your brain naturally wants to move away from that. It wants to go to the comfortable place. So, yeah, that's interesting. But it's so rewarding afterwards when, you've solved
Oh,
something.
it's the best. I love putting on when I know I'm going to do deliberate practice, putting on like my go-to soundtrack too. And I'm curious if you all have like I don't even know if Oz if you code to music, but I would say I want to hear everyone's like coding music choices. Mine are the Halt and Catch Fire soundtrack. That's a show, Oz. of shows to
No,
watch.
I
Oh,
know
you're
that
aware of
because of
that.
the
Okay.
connection to computer history. Yeah.
Okay, that counts. Okay, amazing soundtrack.
I mean, it's got a CPU instruction in the name.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's like it should be catnip for you. That the Amelie soundtrack, and then there's this amazing thing called the disintegration loops or something. But if I put any one of those three things on, I'm gonna have a good time. I'm gonna get shit done. And that is almost like sipping. We were talking about coffee way earlier, but sipping that cup of coffee, sitting down, being ready, putting the headphones on and doing that. I love that. And even if I'm not actually learning anything, that is so pleasurable to put myself in that situation. Yeah, maybe I'm okay with not learning anything in that setting because it's so nice. But Madison, what do you have go-to music that you're jamming to when you're doing your deliberate practice?
I listen to no music, nothing, just
Really?
silence. Yeah,
Okay.
because I feel like I'm often talking to myself, like writing down. Yeah, no, I haven't been done any music in a while, but I might take those recommendations.
Yeah, I'll send
I
them
don't
to
know.
you.
I find it distracting sometimes. I don't know.
Yeah. Oz, do you ever listen? Do you know what music is?
Have you ever heard of
I've heard of someone
Okay.
once told me about this thing.
Okay.
No, I do. I actually worry about that a little bit. Same with caffeine because like I've noticed over the years I've had to take it's kind of a meme, but take more caffeine
Yeah.
and listen to louder and faster music to get into the zone for
Yeah.
programming.
Yeah.
Not for like, working through a textbook or whatever, but yeah, writing code for whatever reason, getting into the flow state has required more of a nudge for me over the years.
I'm wondering, are there any other thinking about that flow book? And he talks about tennis and all these other places where athletes get into flow. There's not really music in those. So is it there's something about coding that music works well for? I'm just wondering if there's any other example of being in flow if you're painting where you'd be putting your like blasting techno music or whatever it is. I can't think of one.
And maybe it depends on the art style.
Yeah, okay, fair, fair. Have you read that book, Madison, the flow book that Oz talks about a lot? I won't
the
pretend. Yeah.
name? It's not actually called the Flow Book, right?
It's called Flow, and the
Oh, Flow
author,
Flow.
what's the author, Oz?
Mihai Csikszentmihalyi.
Okay.
I'm gonna read it now though.
Oh, it's so good.
I
I'll
can,
link
s-
it.
I can some, I mean, it's the guy's work as well. Like the book that's called Flow is like the pop sci approachable version of it, but it was his area of research. But I can summarize, I think, what the core part of it is. I mean, it is like deliberate practice makes people better, whatever. But the thing that I really take from it is a a simple diagram which shows maybe should we try and bring it up on screen
Yeah, yeah.
for those who are watching on screen? Let me find it. Then share screen. So this is from a little article that's a suggestion for people who are not sure like how to work through CS Primer. But this is what I wanted to highlight from the Flow book. Maybe this is from one of his papers, which was a great framework for me. I mean, we were just talking about this kind of thing where it's like, could harder maybe be easier? Like maybe the problem is that it's not challenging enough.
Mm.
And for him, for those who are listening rather than watching in, basically there's a diagonal flow channel going through a 2D space where the x-axis is skill level from low to high, and the y-axis is challenge level from low to high. And basically, if you're doing something where your skills are relatively low, like you're a beginner, and the challenge level is relatively low, then you can get into a flow state and keep going. Uh, if your skill level is high, you more or less need the challenge level to be high for you to stay in that flow state. And as you progress, you more or less need to adjust one or the other in order to be able to keep going. Otherwise, you're prone to either boredom in the case of the challenge not meeting your skill level, or anxiety in the case of it being too challenging. That like I think it's a simple model that captures a lot of what we were talking about. Even when Madison was saying, you sit down to do something and it hurts your brain a lot. It's like, well, it should hurt your brain a little bit, right? But there is a risk that you're kind of dancing outside of this flow zone, right? Where your skills aren't yet up to that particular challenge. And it might be reasonable to reduce the challenge a little bit or to increase your skills in some other way. Do some deliberate practice of the thing that is making this challenge challenging and come back to it. Right. So you can nudge yourself like deliberately along this skill axis, or you can nudge the task down in the challenge level. Even when we talk about the poly method, just like breaking up a problem into pieces or doing a version of the problem that's easier. It's like, I can't solve this problem right now, but I'm not going to give up. I'm going to solve an easier problem. I can't solve the 3D version of this problem. Can I solve the 2D version? I can't do it with arbitrary parameters, but can I do it with two parameters?
Mm.
I can't do it for n equals any input, but can I do it specifically for n equals 3? It's like, surely there's a version of this problem, however minuscule, that I can solve. And maybe that's going to bring it back down into the state where it's like, all right, I got this one. Give me the next one. Now I'll do it for 3 parameters. Now I'll do it in 3 dimensions. Now I'll do it, for a triangle instead of a square or whatever. Where it's like, okay, I can get the ball rolling and it's fun. I'm in flow. I'm not distracted by this other like nagging feeling of anxiety or boredom or whatever. I can keep doing it. I just popped another caffeine tablet. Really love this.
Well,
Really love
the
the
other thing is
soundtrack.
that
The
channel is
Emily
not.
soundtrack's really pumping.
Yes, yes. I'm imagining it now. But the other thing that I loved in this book is not only being in that channel is helping you get better at various things. When they interviewed people about it, that is the happiest moment of their lives. They are most happy when they're in this thing where time stands still. You don't realize that 8 hours have passed. And I don't know, it's like if you can do that and get better at coding and learning C, like that, like, why not? Why not try whatever you can to hit that? So that was another reason why Madison, that book has just been something I've just conceptually returned to again and again, trying to find myself bouncing in there. And the other thing I'd take it to is it's okay to hit anxiety. It's okay to hit boredom, and that's just going to be a natural part of that growth.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
really
kind
want
of
to
bounce
book
between.
now. I love that whole page. I think that how to take CS primer. I feel like anyone learning anything online should take that as their kind of, mental frame of how to go about learning something. I think I struggle on the down on the left, like the anxiety part. And then sometimes I think the trap I fall into is if something is really hard, I sometimes think like maybe it's only hard for me and like no, I'm gonna sit here for 7 hours and I'm gonna grind through it because I want to be disciplined about this. And then 7 hours later, I'm like, oh, maybe I should, reading that article, maybe I should try to make this a little easier. But it's almost like a challenge because I know our brains want to go towards the comfy thing, and I'm like, no, I will sit here and loop over this thing for a long time. So I think I have to, yeah, figure out that sweet spot more. But that's such a good point.
I see that happen a lot. Like I said, I'm sometimes prone to the other direction more, but I have previously been prone to that, like self-talk, and I see that with a lot of people where it's like I should be able to get this, and even like Charlie, when you're talking about is it good to have peer pressure? Like, should you
Mm,
introduce extra peer pressure? To me, it's like maybe that's actually fueling some of that for some people at least.
yeah.
Um, that problematic state of like forcing yourself to work on the task that's poorly calibrated to what is going to give you that really positive, like even sometimes euphoric feedback loop that you're talking about. Like you can't have a euphoric feedback loop that's fueled by wanting to not embarrass yourself at the next like book club
No,
meeting.
no, I know, but one way that I think it's burned me is there's advice if you're working on a novel, which I have been for many years, which we can get into if we want, but is not to tell anybody because you'll get this reaction from people, which is like, oh, that's really cool. I've always wanted to write a book. What's it about? And I'm getting all this endorphins about it. And I still have the book is still shitting on the shelf over there, unpublished. And like, just don't tell anybody. Tell them when they can buy it in Barnes and Noble or whatever. So sometimes I would say involving people has maybe, maybe I'm conflating that with the book not being very good, but and that could be its own series of problems. But I think involving people hasn't always been the best thing, I would say, for me.
For me as well, actually, there is a downside to it that I think is very tricky to figure out. For example, tweeting about reading a book when you haven't finished the book yet. Or
Mm,
tweeting about I'm learning this thing. Like I've totally fallen into that trap. And then I'm like, oh, I get internet points or I get a great feeling from my friends. You learned that thing. Oh, but did I actually learn that? And I think that you can go a while feeling like you're learning, but you didn't actually learn. I've kind of learned this about myself recently, and so I started trying to do different tricks. Like, for example, if I'm gonna share with my friends, whether online or off, that I learned something, I actually want to feel like I learned it first, right? Like if I am gonna share that I read a book, I'm gonna finish this book first. Or like in CS Primer, I solved the sum 10 problem after 12 hours, about 12 hours of working on it. But like my instinct is to share, oh, I'm doing this thing before I actually learned the thing. And so now I've just been like, I'm only going to like share this code or share this book actually after I've actually done it. And that has been really
yeah.
motivating because you kind of feel yourself like, oh, I want the cookie, right? I mean, I want the cookie too, I guess, is what I'm learning about myself in this podcast. So that's been really helping me like, after you've solved the code problem, maybe then you can share it. But before, it's just you're falling into this trap of, yeah, you feel good. Or I know Ryan Holiday had this article about how he looked up thousands of people saying they're writing a novel and talking about it online and sharing their friends, and then like a very small percent actually finish the novel. So similar.
He probably interviewed me. Um,
Yeah.
don't know him, but he might as well have.
Yeah,
Well, that-
novelists I find interesting because there are some who like very clearly get into their flow state and just like can't not write.
yeah.
That's just like how they feel normal. Like if they weren't writing, they wouldn't be people. But then there do seem to be other people who are like, I hate this. This sucks. I'm gonna do it anyway, and like somehow manage to push themselves through it. Like they hate the isolation. They loathe how their existence in some sense, but actually publish the books. So
Yeah.
novelists, I don't know if they're just saying that or they're just like, I
They
hate
just
this
have,
existence, but every other one is even worse. If
yeah.
that's just like a pathology,
I
but
think it's a
yeah, I haven't
pathology, and
figured it
they're also able to eloquently state that pathology well.
out.
I did feel the flow when I was doing that short story project every week, but then as certain projects dragged on, I began to sort of hate it and despise it. Where it's like I just need to move on and start another novel. My main problem now, which is I cannot get myself to do it, is I'm going to have to start waking up at like 2 a.m. So I'll need to go to bed I typically go to bed at like 10. The only way I ever did it was that I'd wake up really early before the sort of house got up. My kids are getting like they're refusing to adhere to daylight savings time or whatever this switch was. So I think they're just going to ride out the whole winter, waking up an hour earlier. So there's just not time in the day. And that is the excuse I'm telling myself. And I know every time I've done something else, it's like, if you're going to do it, you just do it, and I'm just not doing it. And you will find a way to do it. And I'll just continue to feel bad about myself for not doing it. But eventually, I just need to sit down and do it, draw the owl or whatever the heck it is. So I know that there are these mantras or techniques I can tell myself to get it done, and I'm still not doing it. And I'm in a little bit of a vortex on that. And that sometimes comes up with respect to learning stuff.
See, for me in this context, well, firstly, I'm realizing that like this is not universally applicable, and so maybe I should moderate this down, this like suggestion that I'm about to make, and maybe not even say it as a suggestion because I'm definitely not responsive to other people's affirmation. Like that's not. I don't want the cookie. Like if there's a cookie there, I'm walking away from it. It's like no cookies. Definitely not if there are cookies around. It's not for me. So like I'm realizing I should adjust this, but from my personal perspective, the only thing I'd consider here is the challenge well calibrated,
Hmm.
where it's like I would be waking up early and doing this thing if I were excited, and I would be excited if it were well calibrated. You know, to me in this context right now, like maybe with a lot of other stuff going on in my life, I need to do the more fun version of it, the shorter version of it, the version of it that I get to like share with the world sooner or whatever the case may be. I'd be thinking like, why was it that I enjoyed writing a short story every week, but then when it came to writing a novel, I just stopped. Like, what is it about my current task that makes it not feel like that euphoric state of getting a short story done every week? Can I just write a short story every week? Like, can I throw away my actual goal and do more of what was working before? That's the way that I'd be thinking about it personally.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, to me, it is just about enjoying that experience and just like coming up for air a week later and being like, this is what I did. That was cool. I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily care if other people like it too.
I'm nodding my head for those listening. So that makes a lot of sense. Well, Madison, I so appreciate your perspective on this. I feel like this has turned into like a venting session for my own insecurities, but it's amazing. I'm very, like I said at the beginning, and if I didn't, I apologize. I'm really inspired by your learning in public process that you've done, and it's amazing to watch, and it was so fun to chat with you today about that. And I hope we can stay in touch and have you back on to catch up with latest projects and things like that in the future.
What are your latest projects, Madison? Is there anything that you want to refer people to?
Oh, no, not really, honestly. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well,
CS
Okay.
come
Primer.
Heck
back when
yeah.
you got
I
something
feel
to
like I'm a
hype up.
CS Primer ad, honestly.
Okay.
People will message me and be like, "Are you sponsored CS Primer?" I was like, "No, I literally just love this product." And I think it's because there's so many random links that are like, "Here's 50 computer science courses," and then I see people get so overwhelmed with like no real curriculum, and I'm just like, "Oh, you know what I mean?" It makes me upset. So I'm like, "There's a better alternative out there."
Mm.
But anyway, yeah, not really. But yeah, I mean, I have been listening to the podcast and really look up to you guys, and I've been listening a lot. So I was super thrilled to be asked to come on. It completely made my month. So
Amazing. Well, influencer marketing, Oz, this has been a trend for a while, and I think it's beginning now.
Well, I appreciate it, Madison, and
Yeah.
you should definitely share your solution to the sum to amp. You should be proud of that one. It was
I am
great.
proud. You know, it's funny. I was so proud afterwards. And for a week, I was like, I am a genius. And then I just fell off any studying for like 12 days because I was just like basking in the glow every day, watching movies. I was like, wow, I'm really getting places. And I was like, oh, I haven't actually studied again in weeks. I've just been showing the solution to everyone. Like, I'm getting back to it. Yeah. Thank you.
Amazing.
Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to
That could
seeing
be.
the.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care, guys.
See ya.